Last night, everyone was more or less asleep, and I'm laying down, and it's that awesome time of the day where you start to unwind and just relax so you can fall into sleep. And then it sounded as if World War III was going on right outside my window. And I couldn't exactly pinpoint from where everything was coming from. I thought maybe it was coming in the back, in the parking lot, and it wasn't. But the booms from the fireworks were so incredibly loud, you actually kind of heard them twice. You heard them once as they went off, and then again as they echoed off of the buildings and stuff. And my only thought was, Lord, please don't let anyone wake up. This is bedtime. Like, we don't have to worry about this. And all of that sort of is coming to a head because obviously it's 4th of July weekend. And so naturally, one of the things we're going to do is celebrate our nation's independence by almost blowing up a small chunk of it because everyone loves fireworks. Fireworks are amazing. They're big and they're loud. And if you get close enough, but not too close, you kind of feel them reverberate throughout your whole body. And you see the light, and then you hear sort of like this earth-shattering kaboom, and it's just an awe-inspiring thing. I've seen so many fireworks in my time. I don't even take pictures or video of them anymore because, I've just seen so many of them, and nobody wants to see a grainy picture of fireworks. By far, I would say the best fireworks show I've ever seen was at Walt Disney World. The castle one's fine, but we saw a Star Wars one, and that one hit me personally for a number of reasons. But Walt Disney World spends so much money on fireworks because people love them. Because they're big and bright and flashy, and they're so powerful and cool to watch that we try to replicate that at our homes sometimes, regardless of what any ordinances or laws say. Sometimes you're at a friend's house and the tube falls over and smacks off the house, and you have to scramble and cover the kids and run into the house panting heavily because y'all almost got blown up by a firework. That's a true story. Because at the end of the day, fireworks can be dangerous. So if you're going to light off fireworks this weekend, please be safe. And I get it. I understand why you would want to, because they're amazing to look at. But we're not fireworks. And I thought about the role that fireworks play sort of in our popular culture. And they represent sort of what we as a culture try to aspire to be like. They represent this sort of big, flashy, loud, in-your-face thing, right? Like, you hear a firework even if you don't see it. And if you see it but can't hear it, that's fine too. Because maybe you're too far away for the boom. But they are everything we're not. They're loud, they're in your face, they're brash. There's no escaping a firework when you see it. We sit in awe and wonder as we watch them, dazzled by lights and sounds. And we're not them. And I fully believe that's okay. Because I don't think we were meant to be fireworks. See, our model in all things, as we should know at this point, as we've talked about and as we've learned throughout our entire lives, our model is Jesus Christ. We call ourselves Christian, which means Christ-like. So when we call ourselves Christian, when we call ourselves children of God, what we're doing is giving ourselves a title, that we are striving to emulate Christ in all things. So here's my question. If we are striving to be like Christ, why do we try to make it about us? It really is an interesting thing to us because oftentimes we get so excited and we try to do the right thing. We try to share God's word. We try to do everything that we can. But the problem is that our culture dictates that if you ain't first, you're last. That you have to be big and loud and flashy, which is different than how Christ lived his life. You see, part of the miracle of Jesus Christ is not that he's just the Son of God, but it's his humanity. It's the way that we can identify with Christ, but more importantly, how Christ can identify with us. Jesus understands the pain of loss, the pain of stubbing your toe, all of the pain that we as human beings feel. Jesus feels that. So on a very personal level, we can relate to Jesus, and that's awesome. Because what that means for us is the God of the universe is our friend that we can sit down with and have a cup of coffee. Our reading in Mark today, however, takes the other side of that coin. Jesus is teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath, as he is wont to do. And he's spreading his message, which essentially boils down to love God and love people, which again is at odds with the theology of the time. The theology of the time was, follow these really strict rules and you'll be good with God if you are also born into a certain family. And Jesus comes along and says, that's not how this works. And he tries to change their perception of what they know about God. That's the first problem, because people don't like to change their minds at times. But the bigger issue here is not necessarily that the people and that the crowd hears what he's saying, because they're astounded by what he's saying. They look at him and they say, this guy knows his stuff. He understands everything that he's saying. But who does he think he is? You see, they know Jesus because they're in Jesus' hometown. They're like, this is Jesus. The carpenter, the guy who makes tables and stuff. That's who's telling us all this stuff. Look, there's his mom, Mary. There's his brothers. There's his sisters. We know who this guy is. What gives him the right to come in here and tell us how we're supposed to be living our lives? The problem that they have with Jesus is not just a theological one. But part of the bigger problem of Jesus is that Jesus didn't meet the expectations of the people. See, if somebody is supposed to be talking for God, they're supposed to have this loud, big, booming voice, this resonating cadence for everything. And yet what Jesus did when he spoke about God and God's love, he just talked to the people. He would sit down and share a meal and tell the people how much God loved them. It wasn't some big, loud, boisterous, flashy thing that Jesus did. No, all Jesus did was talk to people like they were people. You see, there's a way to talk to people and not talk down to people. One of my favorite jokes that I share with my English major best friend, when we're joking and kind of poking fun at each other, we'll say, oh, I'm condescending you. That means I'm talking down to you, which I find very funny when it's said. And even when he says it to me, I find it hilarious. But too often times, when we're talking to people, when we're sharing God's good news, that is exactly what we are doing. We're talking down to them instead of having this relational moment with them as God has a relational moment with us through Jesus Christ. Instead of emulating Christ in that way, we take it upon ourselves as if we are the only bastion of faith in the world. And so we have to catch the people's attention because that's what they want, because we live in a very consumer-oriented culture. I'm not going to go to church unless I personally get something out of it. Well, this one has the good music. This one has the fog machines and the guitars and all of the programs and all of these things. And so I'm getting so much from that. And yet I think very often about JFK's famous line and how it should apply to the church. Ask not what your church can do for you. Ask what you can do for the church of Jesus Christ. We're not meant to be consumers. We're not meant to be the center of attention. We're meant to be Christ-like, the humble servant. And then I get bothered by the reading in Mark, because the very next thing that happens is Jesus says he can't do any great deeds of power. And to be honest, I don't think it would have made any difference if he did. He goes around and he heals some people, and certainly that's great. That's awesome. Everyone loves a healing. It's not the big, flashy kind of miracles. It's not transmutation, like here's water, now it's wine. It's not resurrection magic, where it's now you're alive. That's awesome. It's not exorcism, where you're casting out demons. It's just walking around humbly healing a few people. That's not going to grab headlines. That's just kind of boring. Then the very next thing he does is he empowers the disciples to go forth, right? He says, awesome, now it's time for you to be like me, and I'm giving you authority to go out and do the things that I do. And he gives them all of this list of stuff. Take a stick, wear one tunic, you don't have to take a change of clothes, no money, no sword, no food. Just you have your stick, you got your sandals, you got your tunic, you go to someone's house and you hang out there till you leave. And then if somebody doesn't want you there as you're getting ready to leave, you shake your sandals off and leave the dust there as a testament against them. He's telling them exactly what they need to do, which is, of course, rely on God. Taking that a streetcar named Desire sort of mentality, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers, right? He's saying, God's going to provide for you. And if people don't want to hear your message, just leave. Well, you don't even have to make a big deal about it. Just say, okay, fine. I'm going to go now. He's preparing them to be rejected, because if they do this right, if they live as Christ is calling them all to live, they're going to fail at times. And they're not going to fail because of anything they've done. They're going to fail because people want something different. Because that's the world that we lived in and the world that we still live in today. Everyone wants the good news of Jesus. I am convinced of that. On some level, we understand the need for Jesus Christ in our lives. The question becomes one of packaging. You have churches that tell you, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to come here with the dazzling lights and the loud music and all of that stuff. And you can tell we're holy because the guitarist is up there sweating his brains out, just singing the same Chris Tomlin riff over and over and over and over again. That's how you can tell they're really holy. And you have some churches who are like, you know what? We're going to help people. We're going to do what God wants us to do. And if you want to have the disco ball for worship and get all dancing and excited for Jesus, that's cool. That's on you. We're just going to, kind of walk with God. It's that humility that Jesus has that we're supposed to emulate. And I think perhaps our reading in 2 Corinthians is one of my favorite passages from Paul. A little background on the Corinthian church. It was not good. We were told in seminary that the church in Corinth was not the place somebody wanted to go for their first ordained call. It was that messed up. They had so many problems. And in fact, when you read 1 Corinthians, Paul makes it known that this is not the first time he's written to them. So 1 Corinthians is not the first letter that he sent to the Corinthians. There were multiple levels because of all of the issues that they had. One of the issues they had was actually surrounding the Lord's table. What they were doing with it was using the Lord's table, which was at that time a literal table where they shared a literal meal. But they were using that and jockeying for position. We do that differently as Presbyterians. We're like, no, this is my pew way in the back because I don't want to be up close. But they were using this as say, yes, I'm right here. This is my spot. Look at how holy I am because of where I am. And so Paul is addressing that and a whole host of other issues. And when we get to our text from 2 Corinthians, he says, look, I'll be honest with you. I know somebody who did something crazy. He was caught up into heaven. I don't know if it was body. I don't know if it was mind. God's the only one who knows the answer to that. But I know this guy. I know this is a thing that happened. I totally believe this happened. I don't know how it happened. I don't know the exact details, but I know that it happened. I will boast on him. I will brag on him. On behalf of such a one, I will boast. I'll say, look at this guy. Look at what he has accomplished. Look at what he's done. He says, but I'm not going to brag about me. And I think he gets it. There is one center of the universe. It's Jesus. Hey, you thought I was going to say the sun there, didn't you? I said the other sun. The center of our universe, the whole center for our world, our lives, focuses solely on the person of Jesus Christ. Period. The chief end of man is to glorify God. That's what we do. Our comfort in life is that we belong body and soul to God. Everything that we are, everything that we were created to be, has one job, which is to point to God. And Paul says, I know it's not about me. I'm not going to brag about myself. I don't want people to think that I'm some dramatic, awesome, perfect person, because I know that I'm not. Too often times we see what we call in modern cultures sort of the cult of personality, which is where a very dynamic figure steps up and sort of gathers all of these followers. And Paul says, I don't want that to happen. That is literally the opposite of what I want to happen. In all things, what he wants, the only thing that he wants, is to glorify God. A very John the Baptist sort of ideology. I must decrease so he can increase. He says, look, I will give you like this example. Paul says, I was given a metaphorical thorn in my side, which I have stepped on thorns and had them stuck in flip-flops in summertime. And I hate it. It is the worst. I have had to retrieve soccer balls and baseballs and frisbees from rose bushes. Thorns are not fun at all. I despise them. So I get the metaphor that Paul is using here. He says, I was tormented. And for 3 days, I asked Jesus, I asked God, I said, God, make it stop. Please make it stop. This is annoying. I don't like it. This is painful. I don't want this to happen anymore. And God's reply is, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. And it clicks. It clicks for Paul, and he says, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness. In all of the ways that I know I can't do something, I am going to point those out. I am going to point out all of the times that I know for a fact I wasn't strong enough to do something, because the only one who was strong enough to get me through it was Jesus Christ. The power of God, the grace of Jesus Christ is sufficient. Therefore, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I'm weak, then I'm strong, because I know what it takes at that point. When I am weak, when I cannot go on, I understand that it is only through the grace of Jesus Christ that I am able to get through anything that I am going through. FROG. Fully rely on God. It's a wonderful little acronym. Fully rely on God. For all things that we have, we fully rely on God. Therefore, it makes sense that Jesus tells the disciples not to take anything. To be quiet. Not necessarily physically quiet, but you don't have to walk around kicking in the door saying, all right, everybody, what's up? We're going to talk about Jesus today. That's not what happens. The disciples go out, they put boots on the ground, and they get to work. I'm almost reminded of FDR here. Speak softly and carry a big stick. The stick that we carry is not a weapon. It is the truth found in Jesus Christ. That is what we carry with us. It doesn't matter if other people want to hear it. We go and we tell them. We do what we do, not because we expect any sort of prize, not because we think it's even going to work half the time, but we do it because that's what God calls us to do. But we do it out of love. We do it humbly. It's not about us. It's not about saying, look at how awesome I am. Look at how many souls I have saved for the kingdom. It's not about that. It's about at the end of the day, when you meet your Maker, your goal is to hear one phrase. Well done, good and faithful servant. That's better than fame. That's better than money. That's better than people even listening to you. And in those times where it's hard, where we have nothing, where we think that we can't go on, that is when God shines, because we know we didn't get through it. We know that God took us through it. God doesn't magically prevent bad things from happening to us. God instead says, wow, that's terrible. Let me help you out with that. And that's what the difference is. That is the God that we praise, and that's why we should always praise that God. We solely rely on God because the truth is we don't have enough power. And this is why we walk humbly, regardless of how the world tells us we're supposed to act. We are giving the world what it needs, not what it wants, and those are drastically different. The world doesn't need more guitars and fog machines and things like that. The world needs the love of Jesus Christ. So we will rejoice, we will revel, and we will exalt all of the ways that we are weak. We will be humble and exalt the Lord in all that we do and say, because we're Christians. And we're going to do our best to emulate Christ. Amen.